Today, we are finally arriving at the promised content. 2 people left with that whole good day, good week, good month, good life shit. It was corny, I deserve that. Anyway, today we are finally getting to the tier list of all the D&D player races. Now, before we begin, I want to clear up one very important thing. This is not about which race is objectively the coolest. It's humans, everybody knows that. This is about the actual power level of the specific race that we are going to be talking about. Now, when I say power level, I am going to take into account mostly the lore, not necessarily their 5th edition interpretation. 5th edition does not interpret things correctly, according to the lore. For example, where's the Tarrasque's no-fly zone? Where's the half-dragons immune to paralyzation? Where is, the Drow's physical superiority over other elven folk? There are a lot of things that 5th edition does not account for. And so I think it is important that when we discuss this sort of thing, we discuss it with relation to its actual interpretation in the lore of the Forgotten Realms and Eberron and Planescape and other settings in the D&D universe. But, with all that being said, make sure that any racism is exclusively fantasy-based. I don't want to see any real-life fantasy, I don't want to see any real-life racism in this video, in the comments on the Twitch stream, in the comments on the YouTube stream, or in the comments of the YouTube video. Okay? So, with all that being said, let's get right into it. So, let us begin. Now, the first race that we have here on the tier list is the Aarakocra. Now, these guys are mostly equal to humans in physicality. They don't have any innate magic, they don't have any immunities or resistances, but they do have 2 things that put them one step above humans. Number 1, because they are elementals in nature, they herald, let's use that word, they herald from the elemental plane of air. They actually have a pretty good attunement to elementals and all that sort of thing, which actually gives them a benefit to their wisdom. And secondly, they have flight and talons, which work as natural weapons. So these guys are actually going to go in B tier, because they're pretty strong, and their ability to fly gives them a massive advantage over pretty much any race that doesn't have either innate magic or innate powers, such as an Aasimar, which is the next one. Now, Aasimars are really, really cool. I like them a lot. One of my favorite races, personally. They are half angels, and they have a number of resistances. Now, they used to have resistance to acid, lightning, fire, cold, all sorts of things. In 5th edition, this was changed so that they only have resistance to radiant and necrotic damage. Now, this does not match with the actual lore, because their resistances are meant to be that of angels, and while angels in 5th edition only have resistance to radiant damage and necrotic damage, that's not really how it works in the books or anything like that. So we are going to go by the lore of Forgotten Realms. Now, they do have resistance to radiant and necrotic, or positive and negative energy, but they also have elemental resistances that we need to account for. Beyond that, they have innate magic that allows them to heal and severely damage their opponents. Heal their allies, of course. They're not going to heal their opponents. And they can even channel a portion of their divine might. Aasimar also tend to have some contact in the heavens, and so they tend to have some heavenly protection. But we're talking about specifically the character itself, not whatever allies they might have. I think that because Aasimar are so powerful, in fact they are one of the more powerful races in the setting, we have to put them in A tier. Let me lower the volume of this a little bit more. There you go. Next, we have Bugbears. Bugbears are pretty strong. They are the largest of the goblinoid races. They're hairy, they have very long arms, and despite their size, they're actually quite sneaky. Now, most of their power does come at the cost of being simple-minded, which does create some problems for them as a race. You'll never, or almost never, see a large group of goblinoids being led by a bugbear unless they are being bullied around by him, and this doesn't usually last very long. Hobgoblins are much more intelligent and equally capable at warfare. Bugbears really just rely on their physicality, which gives them advantages at, earlier levels. A low-level bugbear enemy is most likely going to be more dangerous than a low-level hobgoblin enemy. Unfortunately, this does mean that a bugbear is almost never going to reach those heights of a villain that can threaten a nearby city. They're mostly just going to be local bandits. So, and we do have to account for the potential of the race, which mostly comes from either the mind stats or the personality of the race itself. And do keep in mind, these are not humans. A lot of them are characterized by their race simply because that is biologically how they were created by their gods in the setting. So, I'm going to put the bugbear at around the same level as humans, as they sacrifice some of their mental acuity for the purposes of being a little bit stronger. Now, this is the Aven. Now, the Aven are from one of the plane shifts. I forget which one. However, while they have some affinity with magic, it is no more than what the average human who has dedicated themselves to magic would have. They do have flight, but they lack natural weapons. Additionally, they're not particularly strong from anything that I've read, so I'm going to have to put them in C tier. Aarakocra are simply a stronger race. Next, we have Changelings. I like Changelings. They're pretty cool. They have the ability to shift into, well, anyone that they want, and if I'm not mistaken, some can even change their own clothes, which is, pretty cool. But I do think that their physicality is the same as humans. They just have the additional ability to essentially transform themselves magically into other people. I also believe that they have some capacity for innate magic, but they don't all have it. They just have high charisma, which could also just be related to them being charismatic, having a good personality. So, because their only advantage to humans would be that transformation, I'm going to put them at the same level as the bugbears, because, they don't necessarily have a demerit, but they also don't have an amazing advantage. They can just transform into other humanoids. Now, here we have the Deep Gnomes. And the Deep Gnomes are an interesting race, in my opinion. Because while they are gnomes themselves, they do have quite a number of very powerful abilities that puts them a step above their gnomish kin, such as the rock and forest gnomes, which we will get to later on. Now, the Deep Gnomes have better dark vision, which is huge. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure this causes them to not see as well in the light, but most Deep Gnomes don't want to go in the light, they prefer to stay underground, so we're going to take them where they want to be. They also have some ability with magic, though not as much as their kin, but they are magic resistant, which is really, really, really strong, especially because most forest and rock gnomes have magical abilities that basically just allow them to shapeshift, or it's just cantrip-like stuff, so it's really not that strong. Whereas Deep Gnomes have very powerful magic resistance, and they are kind of hard to detect with magic. So, And I know this may be a little bit controversial. I'm actually going to put deep gnomes at C tier. Because I think that their magical resistance puts them at a level that would be equal to, you know, the flight of the Avens, the physical power of the bugbears, and that sort of thing. I don't think I should put them at B, because they do have the physicality of gnomes. They're not particularly tough, and that creates some problems for them if they decide to go adventuring, or if they get in a fight, or something like that, right? But overall, they are definitely one step above their kin. And in fact, I think this goes for most of the underground races. They tend to be more powerful than their overground races, or overground cousins. Alright, next we have the Dhampir. Now, Dhampirs are interesting, because they have some amount of the strengths of a vampire. They are, in fact, born half vampires for all intents and purposes. Most Dhampirs are not transformed, they are born this way. Whether, you know, it could be a story like Blade, where the mother was transformed while pregnant, and so this causes the child to be born a Dhampir. Other times it's made through a ritual, or something of the sort. But regardless of how the Dhampir is created, they have some of a vampire's strengths, but none or very few of its weaknesses. So because of that, I think that a Dhampir should land on B tier, because while they don't have like the insane power of, you know, transforming into a wolf to you know, go around or do all sorts of things, they also don't have the weakness of, you know, being harmed by sunlight, not being able to go into running water. You know, they can still heal by drinking blood. They can still get all of this stuff, but their thirst is much milder. They basically have none of the drawbacks of vampirism while having some of the benefits. And they can even attain later transformations. They have night vision, they can turn into mist eventually, some of them can even charm enemies. So yeah, I think I'll put them in B tier, one step above the changelings. Next we have centaurs. Now, centaurs are an interesting race, because you've got the player centaurs and the monster centaurs. I am not going to talk about the player centaurs because they don't really exist anywhere in the lore. What you have is the actual monster centaurs, which are half horse, half person. Now, centaurs are an interesting creature, because despite being monstrosities, they are, in fact, neutral good, and they've been revised in Monster Manual for 2025. This is incorrect, of course, but they've been revised into being Fey. They are not Fey because they are, in fact, Prime. They are from the Prime planes of existence, and therefore not from the Feywild. So this lands them squarely in the monstrosity department, as they are the mixture of two creatures born of magic. Now, they are quite physically powerful, they are omnivorous, they tend to enjoy drinking, and they do not like draconic centaurs, dracators. It's a little bit of a fantasy racism situation, but mostly it's because the dracators were also created by magic, but they're far more hostile and destructive, whereas centaurs tend to be protectors. They prefer to help people. Now, in terms of their actual physical abilities, they are essentially a very large human with horse legs. That's it. However, their size does bring disadvantages, but not so many that I would put them below B tier. I think that they should be at the same level as something like the Aarakocra, with their enhanced physicality and being able to fly around and cut things up with their claws, and the Dhampir with their magical capabilities from being, well, half vampires. After that, we have this one. Now, this is an interesting race that I actually found out about while setting up this this list. These are called, let me just scroll down here because I forget their name. These are called the Disembodied. Now, the Disembodied are a very specific race that exists in Grim Hollow Player Pack, or that it exists in Grim Hollow and was introduced with the Grim Hollow Player Pack. And the Disembodied were essentially created through a magical accident that separated these people from their bodies. In terms of actual power, they have some ability to transpose themselves, you know, fade away to avoid injury, disappear, negate fall damage. They can even teleport short distances, though it's a little hard to control. It's essentially the blink spell. So, in terms of actual prowess and power, I would put them probably at C tier. They don't have anything that makes them extraordinary, nothing makes them particularly powerful. They just have some weird abilities that most people would not be able to keep up with, but as soon as you take a competent person, those abilities likely fall to the wayside in terms of their danger. So, next we have the Dragonborn. Now, a lot of people like the Dragonborn because they confuse them with half-dragons. A lot of people fail to realize that the Dragonborns are not, in fact, that strong. In terms of their physicality, they are very, very similar to humans. They are taller, and therefore stronger, but a human that is the same height as a Dragonborn is most likely going to be as strong as they are. Now, what they do have are two things. Namely, they have a breath weapon, and they have resistance to their Draconic Ancestries type. So, you know, a gold Dragonborn is going to be resistant to fire, same as a red. A white Dragonborn is going to be resistant to cold, same as a silver, etc., etc., etc. But that's about it. Their scales don't offer them any extra protection. Their claws don't really serve as weapons. Overall, the Dragonborn were created to be a slave race in a different plane of existence, where dragons ruled everything because there was no split between chromatic and metallic dragons, and so they were able to wipe out giants. There was no long war that resulted in both races becoming exceedingly rare and allowing smaller races to take over. No. In this dimensional plane of existence, or this alternate dimension, whatever you wish to call it, dragons ruled everything, and they created the Dragonborn to serve them. And it very much shows because they are, in essence, no different from humans. However, they do have one thing that sets them apart. Dragonborns are exceedingly ambitious, which is strange for a slave race, but not so strange when you consider that they managed to escape and immediately set to work establishing themselves as proud members of the new society that they've been integrated in. Most of them are good, and most of them don't like dragons. Some have taken to the worship of Bahamut, and some who believe that they can gain power by serving the evil dragons of Toril have taken to the worship of Tiamat. However, you'll never find a Dragonborn that is just a low-level grunt. Their ambition, and the rarity of their race, makes it so that they yearn to be in positions of power. A Dragonborn smith is going to strive to be the best smith he can ever be. A Dragonborn villain is going to strive to be the greatest villain that has ever been seen. And because of that, I'm going to put them at B tier, especially because they are essentially human plus. Next, we have the dwarves. Now, I'm including hill and mountain dwarves here. That includes gold dwarves, shield dwarves, all those different types of dwarves that are not Duergar, because overall their power level is very similar, so we can just put them all together. Dwarves live very long, they're very tough, they're very capable with weapons, they're very long-lived, and they dedicate themselves to their craft, whether that be smithing, fighting, drinking, or just partying. If you encounter a dwarf, he will be an expert of whatever it is he's doing. And for that reason, B tier. Now, all of these tiers are equivalent, right? So I'm not like organizing the tier in itself yet. We might do it later, especially for S tier and A tier. Next, we have the Deva. Now, the Deva is technically a monster race. However, this is, for all intents and purposes, as close to a humanoid as a Celestial can get. And they are, in fact, quite powerful. A Deva is the lowest level of conscious angel, and a lot of times Devas are sent down to Toril or whatever prime plane of existence is in your setting of choice to guide mortals or investigate a dangerous situation. They are powerful, have access to a lot of divine magic, not all of it merciful, let's say, and they are exceedingly difficult to fight if you choose to do so, because they have all of the powers of an Aasimar, and then some. They have all of those resistances, all of those protections, some additional immunities, and on top of that, they are always channeling their divine power. That means they can fly, that means they can cast spells, that means that if you choose to engage them in melee because you assume they're a spellcaster, they're just going to bash your brains out with their bare hands because of how strong they are. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the Deva in S rank. This is our first S rank. They are exceedingly powerful. And if we put a single Deva against any member of the races below, they are going to win 9 times out of 8. They're gonna win that fight every single time. So, and again, I am talking about average members of the races. I'm not talking about the greatest examples of each individual race. Because if we were talking about the greatest examples of an individual race, we couldn't put a Deva here, we'd have to put a Solar. And in that case, the Solar still wins 9 times out of 10. So, on to the next. We have Elves. Now, Elves are one of the most long-lived races in the setting. They live 700 to 1,000 years, and most of them have innate magical powers. This specific elf that we're talking about is specific to the High Elves and the Wood Elves. This means Sun Elves, Moon Elves, Sea Elves, all that. And they have innate magical power, they live very long lives, and they will, a lot of the times, offer themselves to the lesser races, as they most likely think, as a figure of wisdom and power, a source of knowledge. But when living by themselves, they tend towards more individualistic lifestyles, which lends itself to their chaotic nature. This doesn't mean that they go around stealing and causing trouble, it just means that they prefer to live in family units, not really concerning themselves with the greater good of society, as they believe that if you pursue individual good, you will achieve greater good. In terms of their actual prowess, they are much faster than normal humans, much more graceful. They have innate magical powers, and so for that, I'm going to put them in B tier, right next to the dwarves. While dwarves don't have magical power innate to them, they are still very capable, and their physicality closes that gap very nicely. Next, we have fairies. Fairies are an interesting race. They are very small. Physically, they stand no chance against any of these other races that we have here. However, they do have a lot of magical power innate to them. Unfortunately, that magical power is mostly not dangerous and not really able to do much beyond just annoy somebody that they are trying to annoy. They have fairy fire, they can enlarge someone, and they can do druid crafts. But essentially that just makes each of them a very low-level druid. So for that reason, I'm going to put them at D tier, as the abilities that they have don't do enough to close the gap between themselves and others of larger races, but they're still there. So I'm leaving them in D tier. Not really a high D tier either, they're D tier. Next we have the Dwergar. Dwergar are a slave race to the Drow in a lot of aspects. However, they have a lot of very interesting powers. Duergar themselves have innate magic, and they are capable of resisting some effects. They're not outright immune against charms and paralyzation, but they are resistant to them. They train with weapons a lot, and they have all sorts of, training for smithing, brewing, masonry, the same as a regular dwarf. On top of that, they also have the ability to turn invisible and make themselves much, much bigger, which makes them very dangerous on the battlefield. So if we were to put a Duergar of any kind versus a hill or mountain dwarf of the same kind, the Duergar would probably win. For that reason, I am going to put it in B tier, because I don't think Duergar are strong enough to compete with, Aasimar, Drow, Genasi, and other powerful transplanter races. But I understand that the Drow aren't from a different plane of existence, but it's just about that's where they sit in the scale, in my opinion. But I do think that they should be above the dwarves. So they're B tier as well, but they're like one step above dwarves. My favorite Ra is the Egyptian god. The word race is cut off on your stream. The word race is cut off on the stream. What do you mean? Aren't Duergar slaves of the Illithids though? Sometimes. They have some, but they were slaves of the Drow more so than the Illithids. But the Illithids that live in the Underdark basically kidnap anything and make it a slave. So it's not so much that the Duergar are slaves of the Illithid. They just live in a place where everybody else is a bigger fish than themselves. That's why they're only B tier. But I don't know what you mean. Like you're on mobile. You're on mobile. How does the stream look on mobile? Let me see here. How does this look on mobile? Doesn't really. Yeah. Duergar are the best form of dwarves. Yeah, they are definitely objectively stronger than other dwarves. I don't know what you mean by the word race being cut off on this stream. Oh, I see it. I see it. It's on the screen. There you go. And yes, the Egyptian god Ra is in fact the coolest Ra. Firbolg are S tier. They're definitely high tier. But let's talk about Genasi. Now, the Genasi are essentially regular humans that have been touched by one of the elemental planes. They have quite a bit of powers relating to their elemental nature, but the thing that they all have in common is, number one, resistance to their element of birth, for all intents and purposes. They live long lives. They can live over 100 years a lot of the times, almost as long as an Aasimar. And they usually have some amount of power that allows them to essentially control the elements. So an air elemental, Genasi can control the air, Earth Genasi, etc., 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 and they have innate abilities that relate to this. Got nothing for touching a holy by being touched by a holy man. Yeah. They also have resistance to charm and stunned. Paralysis, not stun. Duergar do not have resistance to being stunned. Only paralysis, not stunned. But the Genasi have all sorts of powerful abilities, and on top of that, they have further ease with learning more of the magic that relates to the elements. This can either be divine magic or innate sorcerer magic, which is pretty strong. So, for that reason, I don't want to put them on the same level as an Aasimar, but I feel like they deserve to be in A tier. So let's say that they are in low A tier. I feel like they work well with the Genie Warlock. They do. They do work very well with the Genie Warlock. They're also very powerful sorcerers. And depending on the one that you pick, you might lean one way or the other more so. But they all have very high constitution. They're all very tough. And their elemental resistance is very, very nice. Other than that, we have the Eladrin. Now, Eladrin are probably one of the strongest versions of elves. Elves originate. Elves originate from the Feywild, and so because of that, the Eladrin are essentially the birth race of the elves. They're extremely powerful, they change throughout their lives, and the average Eladrin warrior, a summer Eladrin, is powerful enough to stand with the most mightiest of elves. So I'm gonna put of the most mightiest of heroes, and some of them even compared to angels and transplanar units, transplanar monsters, such as angels, and sometimes even demons. So I'm going to put the Eladrin as an S tier race because of how strong the average Eladrin can get. They are pure, wild, fey magic. They are immensely powerful, and an Eladrin adventurer can get to such immense power that by the time they return to the Feywild, a lot of the times they are elevated in position to that of basically a god. Could do a minus. I could, but I feel like if we add too many, it becomes a little confusing. So I like it like this. Now, the Drow. The Drow are a very interesting race. A lot of people like the Drow, and a lot of people don't really seem to understand just how powerful Drow really are, including Wizards of the Coast. So, let's talk about the Drow. The Drow are elves, so already they have to at least be in B tier. However, they do live in the Underdark, which is an extremely dangerous place to live. It's full of powerful psionic creatures such as the Illithids. You've got fungal opponents. You've got beholders living in the underground. You've got demons. You've got all sorts of things. On top of that, their goddess Lolth essentially forces them to engage in eugenics or face annihilation. So they have to be in A tier, because this is essentially what would occur to the elves if they engaged in hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years of eugenics. Male Drow are actually physically weaker than female Drow. However, they are the main force of their military, as female Drow are rarer than male Drow. There are not as many female Drow as male Drow. This is either a quirk of their biology, or it is the decision of Lolth, their goddess, who wishes for only the strongest females to rise. Now, only females can be priests of Lolth, which means that the males, if they want magic, they must study it. They must be wizards, which does work to incentivize the more ambitious mages, the more ambitious males, to become very powerful mages indeed. Their society is matriarchal and very misandrist. They see males as below themselves, if that makes sense. They do want them below them because, but most of the time they see males as serving only as fodder for the military or fodder for the bed. Other than that, they have innate magical resistance, much more innate magic than the average high elf, who has more innate magic than the average wood elf, who has more innate magic than the average human. So, Drow are extremely capable when it comes to innate magic. They are extremely physically capable, and on top of that, they have powerful dark vision. Now, this dark vision does get in the way when they step out into the sunlight, but overall, it's still a benefit because they can work around it. They are known to use goggles to protect their eyes when raiding the surface. Alternatively, they can simply raid the surface at night and be perfectly fine. So I'm going to put them at A tier, above the Genasi, below the Aasimar, because the Aasimar have a lot more potential. Although, actually, I would say that the Drow start out stronger than the average Aasimar, even though no. Because a lot of the power of the Drow comes from their superior training, which not every Aasimar will have, but the innate resistances of the Aasimar put them above a Drow of similar training. Are you doing Warforged? Because I'm not sure if they are fantasy or sci-fi necessarily. They are fantasy, we will talk about it when we get to them, but they are right here. They are covered kind of by Anti-Kill. But yes, we will be doing Warforged, because they are fantasy. So, let me just get a sip of water. I have a burp stuck in my throat. And I tried to burp, and instead now I have a bubble of air stuck in my fucking throat. This is getting cut out from the YouTube video, holy shit. Whew. Like, it's hard to fucking breathe because of it. Pardon. Anyway, sorry about that. Ugh. Alright. On to Githyanki. Githyanki are one of the more powerful. One of the most powerful, actually. Fantasy races in D&D. They live forever, essentially, because they live in the astral plane where time does not pass. Brother, damn. My bad. My bad, guys. My bad. You cannot imagine how relieved I feel, by the way. Like, that was so much pressure on my chest. Like, I feel so much better now. Regardless. The Githyanki. They train for combat their entire lives. They are a warrior race. And the average Githyanki warrior will put the average Drow to shame. There's a reason why, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3, Lae'zel treats pretty much everyone as being a weakling, even though she looks very wiry. Most Githyanki look like that, but their muscles are extremely dense. They are more physically powerful than even Dragonborn at their peak. So, we could never put them here, because everyone in this lane would lose to them purely off of physicality. And if we put them here, they will annihilate everyone on their right with psionic powers. The most powerful Githyanki essentially have mental telekinesis. They can even throw you around if they want. And some are even capable of manifesting great telekinetic hands to crush their opponents and work as almost improvised siege engines, which kind of leads them to not necessarily need real siege engines because they can simply rely on the power of their mind. On top of that, the more powerful Githyanki are given silver swords. Swords that are so attuned with their mental capacity that they function as Vorpal weapons. They are some of the original Vorpal weapons were created by the Githyanki, on top of giving them additional protections from mental assault. Every time that you acquire a Vorpal weapon as a fighter in D&D, know that you are essentially using a weaker version than the standard issue weapon of a Githyanki knight. Beyond that, they don't have a lot of protections in terms of immunities or capacities. All they have is their own psychic resilience, because they are powerful psionics, so they have some resistance to that, but it's rare that you'll encounter an enemy that can use psychic magic, so this isn't a resilience that helps them that much, but their long lives, even longer than elves a lot of the times, allow them to learn so much that their own physical power and prowess becomes legendary by every other standard. So Githyanki definitely belong in A tier alongside the Aasimar and above the Drow. I won't put them above the Aasimar simply because the Aasimar have so many protections that for a very long time they weren't even meant to be a player race because of how strong they're meant to be. Next, we have the Furbolgs. Now, Furbolgs are an interesting race because they are half-giants, same as the Goliaths, which... Where the fuck are the Goliaths here? Goliaths are supposed to be here. Where's the Goliath? Is this the Goliath? I think this is the Goliath. Okay, so, Furbolgs are half-giants. Unlike Goliaths, however, they are not fully focused on their physical prowess. While a Goliath would be very given to sports and running and jumping, and essentially they make really good fighters because of this dedication that they have to physicality and athleticism and sports. Goliath really do like sports. Furbolgs lend themselves more to the study of nature. They used to be a warmongering race, but that was very early on in their creation, and very quickly they became more so half-giant innate druids, for all intents and purposes. They prefer to use their strength and power as protectors of nature. They have the ability to detect magic and disguise themselves, and they can even become invisible, which is really useful for somebody as big as them. They can innately speak to plants. They can innately converse with animals to a lesser extent than their communication with plants, but they still have the ability to communicate them to a lesser extent. And so because of that, because of their physical prowess, I have to put them on low A tier. Speak to plants but not understand what the plants are saying. That is true. They cannot actually understand what the plants are saying. They can only speak to them. Yeah. That is an important thing. It's kind of the same thing with the animals. Like, they can speak to plants and animals and have those plants and animals understand them. They just can't understand them back. At least not their words. They can understand to some extent by interpretation. But I would put them below the Genasi because the Genasi can become much, much more powerful with their elemental magic. But the Furbolg themselves have druidic innate magic, which is itself pretty powerful, on top of being very physically powerful themselves. Next, we have the Githzerai. Now, the Githzerai are a brother race to the Githyanki, so I'm going to put them right next to the Githyanki. However, while the Githyanki dedicate themselves to warfare, and most of them are fighters, and even their mages are Gish, which is essentially a fighter mage. This is where the term comes from. A Gish is a Githyanki who dedicates themselves to the study of not just warfare, but also magic. They do have dedicated mages, but not nearly as many as they would have Gish. Whereas the Githzerai focus on inner peace and control of their own inner chaos. This is because they live inside of Limbo, which is a plane of chaos. A single thread of irregularity is enough to throw the entire colony of Githzerai into, well, chaos and possibly destruction. And that is a very dangerous thing. So the Githzerai have to be very disciplined. And in terms of fighting prowess, a lot of Githzerai are in fact stronger than Githyanki. However, there are not nearly as many. So I will say that the Githzerai will stand one tier above the Githyanki, even though they would normally lose a battle against their, I don't want to call them brothers because they hate the shit out of each other. They're cousins. But a Githzerai Zerth is one step above a Githyanki Knight, if I had to guess. Although the Githyanki Knight definitely has better equipment. The Githzerai Zerth use what they call Anarch Blades, or Zerth Blades, which are essentially born from chaos and very, very powerful, and can essentially sever anything, much like the Silver Blade of the Githyanki. However, anyone with psychic power can wield a Githyanki Silver Sword. However, only the Zerth can wield the blade of an Anarch. So that is their main differentiation. I do consider that the Githzerai are stronger than the Githyanki, but I could be wrong. Let's actually look what the 5e monsters have to say about this, even though I disagree with the vast majority of the shit that they have to say about, well, pretty much anything. But let's see what they have to say. So, a Githyanki warrior is CR3, Githzerai monk is 2, Githzerai Zerth is 6, Githyanki knight is 8, Githzerai Scion is 12, a Kithrak, which is basically a knight that has been granted his own dragon, is 12. Okay, yeah, okay. So, on average, they seem to be a little weaker, according to the books and stuff. However, the peak, the Anarch, is stronger than the Githyanki Supreme Commander. Or whatever the fuck they call them. What do they call them? Dracomancer, which is basically a mage focused on draconic magic. But yeah, the Supreme Commander of the Githyanki stands below the highest form of a Githzerai. So I'll put the Githyanki in front, purely because they are much more powerful on average. On to the next race, which is the Gnolls. Now, Gnolls are stupid, dirty, ugly dog people, and they suck balls. However, physically, they are powerful. They have a number of innate weapons. They are very strong, even if they are dumb. They are cannibalistic. And if they are attacking somebody who is already weakened and they manage to take it down, that actually causes them to frenzy, which allows them to keep fighting even harder. So the better the fight is going for them, the better it's going to be. It's very hard to turn a fight around against a Gnoll because of this. However, their bloodlust and simple-mindedness does put them at a level where, yeah, they're fodder for adventurers in a lot of times. Isn't like Big Mama, Big Head, that's their boss? Yes, that is, shit, I forgot her name. The Lich Queen. Fuck, what's her name? Githyanki Queen Vlaakith. Yes, Vlaakith is a lich, and she feeds on the souls of her knights, and then essentially uses them almost as if meat puppets. That's a thing. Yes, she doesn't fully feed on their souls, but she does feed on them to an extent. It's a complicated thing, and it's hard to explain. But Vlaakith is onto a god because of it. She is very, very strong. Next, we have the average gnome, D tier. Then we have the Gith. Gith are strong. All right, I'll talk about the gnomes, but gnomes aren't particularly strong physically. They are capable of some innate magic, not that much, but they do have the capacity to learn more magic, and in fact, they are quite intelligent, very cunning, and they lend themselves to the study of engineering and scientific arts. Unfortunately, their intelligence is not enough to compensate for their lack of physicality. Which kind of means that unless they have help from other races, they can't really stand on their own. They lack that ability, which is a problem. And yes, I do require that a character or a character race be somewhat intelligent in order to be able to rise above C tier, unless their physicality is extremely powerful. But in the case of gnomes, their lack of physicality is so intense that they have to stand at D tier. I will put them ahead of the fairies. I'll do that. They are a high D tier, but that's it. That's all they get. They don't get any more. The Gith are an interesting race. They're very capable of combat. In fact, their entire race is a warrior race. They are very capable with firearms. They're very tough. They're hippopotami, which makes them damn near invulnerable to most stabbing and cutting attempts, and also they're sturdy enough that if you swing a mace at them, you're probably not going to hurt them that much. Their entire race is basically built for war. Unfortunately, not a single one of them is capable of casting magic, and they require outside help to be able to access divine magic. However, I do believe that they have some ability to channel psionic power into their weapons in a way that even they aren't really fully aware. So it allows them to hit a little bit harder But honestly, that just lends itself to how physically powerful they are. In terms of the physical might of a GIF, I don't know that there's a race that could compete with them if all they have is physicality. However, as soon as we start looking at a Firbolg or a Genasi that has a lot of innate power, I don't think that they are capable of competing. Goliath? I don't think so. I think GIF are physically stronger than Goliaths. Just based on the fact that they are so fucking tough. I'm going to put them at A tier, next to the Firbolg, because I think that's where they would land. Because Goliath are a type of half-giant as well, so they might be able to. So, we'll see. Now, on to the Goliath right here. They are everything that the Firbolg is, except fully dedicated to physicality. They are capable of learning magic, they just prefer more physical endeavors. It's an entire race of half-giant jocks. They love physical exercise, they love athleticism, they love team sports, they love being able to do all sorts of things with not just their friends, but the rest of their clan. They're very lawful neutral in this regard. Now, sometimes they do resort to banditry, but this is all from the perspective of feeding the clan. And they are very powerful. They also have a very strong sense of fair game, so it's not like they're going to pick on weaker races commonly. They're not like the half-giants of Matthew Mercer's setting, which are much more violent. Goliaths are a race unto themselves. The half-giants, I believe, of Matthew Mercer's settings are very similar to the half-giants of Pathfinder, but I don't know enough about this. This is about D&D specifically. Matt Mercer's setting is mostly inspired by Pathfinder, so I cannot speak to it to great degree. But I will put the Goliaths on A tier next to these three. Yes. And next we have the Grung. The Grung are an interesting race. They're very poisonous. Simply touching them is enough to poison a regular human. They are completely immune to poison themselves. Unfortunately, they need to fully immerse themselves in water for at least 1 hour a day, or they begin to die. They can jump really long and high because they're frogs, but that weakness essentially means that they can never really go anywhere other than swamps or near large bodies of water in which they can immerse themselves. They tend towards evil, and while they're not necessarily dumb, they are unambitious, owing to the fact that they are lawful and have a strict caste system. So, they're not going to do much. That being said, their innate ability with poison, their innate affinity with poison, I'll say, does make them very dangerous. I'm going to put these guys here. Next, we have the Goblinoids. Or, not Goblinoids, we've already talked about one type of Goblinoid, the Bugbear, right here. Next, we have Goblins. Now, Goblins are very dexterous, but very wimpy. In fact, their bones are so weak that the average human could probably kick straight through a Goblin. Just like, scythe right through the guy. That being said, they are extremely violent, but also extremely cowardly. They will never try to fight if they don't have you outnumbered at least 3-1. But they are cunning. They will hide, they will disengage, and they will set traps and ambushes for you until you are exhausted and fall over dead for them to loot you. That being said, if you suddenly get up, they will run for the hills. So for that reason, I'm going to put goblins at D tier. In fact, I will put them below gnomes, because I think that the average gnome could kick the shit out of a goblin if push came to shove. Next, we have halflings. Now, halflings are an interesting race. Halflings can be quite stout, or they can be light-footed. But the thing that really sets them apart from every other race is the fact that despite how small and unimpressive a halfling might be physically, they are born heroes. They're extremely lucky, they're extremely fearless, and any time that they are put in a situation where they have to step up to the plate and save the day, a halfling will succeed. For that reason, I'm going to put them right here. High C tier, because they deserve it. Humans are humans, you know. We're built... Humans are essentially the base race. Every other race is stronger or weaker by comparison to humans. However, humans do have something that none of the other races have. Humans have the ambition to become heroes. It's why so many of the heroes of the Forgotten Realms are humans. Elminster, Abdel Adrian, granted he was half a god. Driss Duwarden on the inside, he's one of the good ones, so he's really just a human stuck in a dark elf body. Catti Bree, she's also a human. Overall, I think, is she a half-elf? I might be stupid. She might be a half-elf. Will Ravengard, Balduran himself, the Neverwinter, the founder of the city of Neverwinter. You know, a lot of the heroes of the Forgotten Realms are humans, and they are largely responsible for a lot of the things in the setting happening the way that they do. In fact, almost all of the mortals that ascend to godhood were humans originally. There are exceptions, of course, such as the what are they called? The blue goblins. I always forget what they're called. Whatever. But most of the gods that ascend from mortaldom were humans. And so I'm going to put them at high C tier. Because if something is possible, a human will be the one to achieve it. Next, we have half-elves. Now, half-elves are an interesting case, because usually a half-race will take all of the strengths of both races with none of the weaknesses. In this case, a half-elf is really just a step in between a human and an elf. They are extremely charismatic, extremely attractive to both humans and elves. However, elves tend to dislike their half-elven brethren. They find that they are too human, and so half-elves tend to be excluded from elven society a lot of the times. So I'm gonna put them at B tier right here. Now, keep in mind, these rankings are not super organized, but maybe I should organize it. Let's do this. There. I think this works really nice. Actually, no, the centaur should be above them. Yeah, there you go. Next, we have a race that I actually don't know a lot about. We have the Harengon. So let's read up on the Harengon together. The Harengon are bipedal, rabbit-like humanoids. Native to the Feywild, blessed with Fey luck, keen senses, and precise footwork. Powerful legs could propel them into impressive jumps akin to a rabbit's hop. With training, Harengons were peerless snipers with a light crossbow. Able to hit targets that were 320 feet away and behind cover. Okay, very interesting. So, the way this translates is they basically have the innate ability to jump, you know, as per the spell without casting the spell, and they can add to their dex saving throws as a reaction, but they can't do it if they're prone or their speed is 0. And they can add their proficiency bonus to their initiative roll. So, really high reflexes, really high perception, really good footwork, and they can jump really high. Okay. I'll put them here. I'll put them here, because that speed is very useful. Actually, no, I'm gonna put them here. I have to be fair, because, like, it's not something that's gonna put them ahead of something like the average human that is, you know, larger and stronger than them, because these guys are not particularly large. From what I'm reading here, they're actually they're medium-sized, but they're not. Nothing here is showing that they are large by comparison to like other smaller races. What is the second one on the C list? The second one is the Changeling, which is basically just a regular human that can shapeshift. That's it. It's not like a particularly special, not a particularly special race in any way, shape, or form. I'm gonna put the Harengon on C tier as well, because I don't know enough about them, which makes me think that they haven't really achieved that much. And I think that that's important. You gotta actually, like, do shit. Now, next, we have the Hexblood. Now, a Hexblood is a child of a hag and a mortal. Now, normally, hags steal mortal children and turn them into hags by eating them and then giving birth to them again. It's really weird. But a Hexblood is essentially a different thing, but it's also kind of the same. It's basically a human hag, for all intents and purposes. An individual infused with eldritch magic, fey energy, or mysterious witchcraft. Some who enter into bargains with hags gain their deepest wishes, but eventually find themselves transformed. These changes evidence a hag's influence. So, yeah, sometimes a Hexblood is born either through direct lineage to a hag, other times it's because they made a wish and then the hag fucked them up because of it. It's hard to know for sure. My lips are fucky, so I need to apply a little bit of this. Overall, they're pretty powerful. They have a lot of a hag's powers. They can create tokens with, hair or nails or such. They are telepathic. They can see things from far away. They have innate magic, hex magic. So I'm going to put them at the same level as the Dhampir, because physically they aren't special. Dry lip having ass. I am literally fixing the lip problem. I am fixing the dry lip problem, and you are criticizing me. This is abuse. Carrying on. They're not exceptional physically, like A tier, but they do have innate magic, right? The way that this is like, C is basically human tier. B is you either have an exceptional physical capability or you have innate magic that sets you apart. Not like low-level innate magic, like just disguising yourself a little, or, turning invisible, or this guy who just has an affinity with magic. No, like being able to charm your enemies, being able to see from 10 miles away and create tokens, and having an affinity with dark magic, or, having hundreds of years to practice an art before you ever have to apply it, or being able to enlarge yourself for combat, or being a fucking horse, or being able to fly. Like, that's what puts you in B tier. In A tier, you either need to be damn near indestructible, like these two, or have exceptional physical stats, like this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, as well as magical power, or just be a fucking Genasi that can channel elemental magic like it's nothing. Next, we have half-dragons. Now, half-dragons are what a lot of people think Dragonborn are. They are incorrect. Dragonborn and half-dragons are different in a lot of aspects. For example, a Dragonborn doesn't look like a dragon. They have some draconic traits, but they are mostly humanoids. They do not come from eggs. They don't have tails. They don't have wings. They don't have claws. They barely have scales and fangs. A half-dragon, however, looks like his draconic ancestry. A red half-dragon is going to have the traits of a red dragon. They're going to have not just physical, but personality traits. They can fly. They have claws. They have powerful breath weapons comparable to a dragon. They are so powerful that almost every time that a half-dragon is born, they are elevated in the society that they are a part of. But they are exceedingly rare. A half-dragon that manages to attain enough power to become a villain is something that requires the attention of everyone involved to stop because of how physically powerful they are, on top of having a dragon's affinity to magic, on top of having a dragon's proficiencies and immunities. We haven't talked about immunities in a while because a lot of races just don't have them, but a half-dragon is outright immune to sleep and paralysis, on top of immunities based on their draconic type. So, you know, depending on the type of dragon that they are, they might have additional things. These guys are so fucking strong that to compare them to Dragonborn is to be dumb. A quick way to know that you're talking about a half-dragon rather than Dragonborn is the presence of a tail. The tail is a very big giveaway because Dragonborn do not have tails. I repeat, Dragonborn don't have tails. They're literally just fire-breathing lizards. That's it. That's all Dragonborn are. A half-dragon, however, is everything good about being a dragon in humanoid form. These guys will fuck you up in front of your kids. Next, we have the kobolds. Cowardly, not that strong. Most of them aren't that smart. Overall, they're weaker than goblins. But they're cunninger. Cunninger? More cunning. They're very good at traps. They're very good at serving masters. And they're very good at groveling. Unfortunately, that's about it. That's all they do. They're not impressive. Next, we have the Kalashtar. Now, the Kalashtar are an interesting breed. Kalashtar are everything brutal and cunning, or cunning and brutal. Just cunning and cowardly. Unfortunately, they are not brutal at all. We will get to the brutal, though. We'll get there. But first, let's talk about the Kalashtar. Kalashtar are interesting. They are essentially spirits given form. They are a compound of humanity with a renegade spirit from the plane of dreams, spirits called Quarry. Now, the Kalashtar have a lot of powerful abilities, and they're extremely powerful shaman, or clerics, or druids. They have protection against psychic attacks. They have advantage on all wisdom saving throws, which, because of their dual minds, because they're technically two people in one body, it's a person and a spirit. They can sleep, but they don't connect to the plane of dreams, as other creatures do. Instead, they draw from the memories of the spirit while they sleep. So they are immune to spells and other magical effects that require you to dream, like, dream, but not necessarily to spells that make you sleep. So it's a weird thing. In terms of physicality, they are basically just humans, but they have additional magical capacity. So I'm going to put them here next to the Hexbloods and the Dhampir, because that's kind of where they fall. Next, we have the Half-Orcs. I'm pretty sure that's meant to be a Half-Orc. Either this is a Half-Orc or this is. Let me make sure. No, hold on a second. I actually have this open right here. Okay, that is a half-orc. Yeah, this is a shifter. So, half-orcs. Half-orcs are all of the physical strength of an orc with none of the drawbacks. They're extremely capable of being intelligent and being clear-minded, while also having all of the physical strength and stature of a powerful orc warrior. For that reason, I'm putting them right here, next to, I'll put them one step below elves and dwarves. They are capable, but dwarves and elves are much more so. They're not as long-lived as dwarves. In fact, they're not even as long-lived as humans. But they are physically stronger than humans, whilst having absolutely no drawback whatsoever. On top of having, the capacity to shrug off mortal wounds a lot of times. They're very tough. Very, very tough. Next, we have the Kenku. Now, the Kenku are interesting. They're not particularly special. They're basically just tiny bird people, about 5 feet tall. So, you know, most of us have met somebody of the same height as a Kenku. They can't fly, and they can't talk. What they can do is they can mimic sounds that they have heard, like a crow. This is a curse that was placed upon their race, so, you know, there's a lot of people who want to play a Kenku, but they don't want to play a Kenku, and as a DM, I usually say, dude, like, the whole point of playing a Kenku is to engage with the fact that you can neither fly nor speak. So, like, what is the point of playing as a Kenku if you don't want to engage with those things? That being said, some people are weird, and it is their right to be weird. So, in terms of power, they don't really have that much, so I'm going to put them in C tier, because I don't think that they are weaker than, say, a gnome, but they're definitely not strong enough to be anywhere else. They're very stealthy. They're very capable in thievish situations, but overall, not particularly impressive. Next, we have the core. I have no idea what a core is. I found out about them because of this list. And they are from Planeshift Zendikar. They are reverent of the land, they're nomadic, live spare existences defined by constant travel, they're masters of ropes and hooks. They do not have innate magic. They are lucky, much like a halfling. They're brave, much like a halfling. And they climb. So basically, they're mountain climbing halflings. So I guess they sit here. Next, we have the lizard folk. Now, lizard folk are cannibalistic, not that intelligent. However, they do have very tough armored bodies, much tougher than even a dragonborn's, which don't have armored bodies. But they are pretty tough. I'll put them here because their lack of intelligence does affect 61 people here looking at someone the size of a Kenku. Bro, why are you literally so mean to me? But they lack the mental acuity to be truly impressive. So they sit at C tier. Because the average lizard folk will fuck up the average untrained human. That being said, the average trained human will fuck up the average trained lizard folk. They've been changed as of Monster Manual 2025 into elementals, but that is incorrect, and we are going to ignore it because it's stupid. Next, we have the Kender. Now, Kender are actually pretty fun. How the fuck is this written? The fucker's here somewhere. How's this written? Ah, there it is. Kender. So, Kender are essentially halflings in physicality. However, they have an innate curiosity that makes it so they don't really respect personal property a lot of the times. They kind of just see something interesting and they grab it and then they put it into their pack to look at it later. They don't do this out of malice. So if you ask for your thing back, they will just give it to you because they didn't realize that they took it in the first place. They were like, oh, this is neat. And then they put it away. And it gets them into trouble. But they don't do this out of malice. It is just something that they have. They're not a particularly numerous race. They're from Krynn, so that's the world of Dragonlance. But yeah, they're basically just thieving little halflings, even though they don't necessarily mean to be. They're also very good at pissing people the fuck off, so that's neat. Next, we have orcs. Now, orcs are, you know, very tough, very brutal, very strong. But they're also dumb. In fact, they're dumber than bugbears. Which actually, I'll put the bugbear here. No, I'll put the bugbear below the lizard folk because the average lizard folk can go farther than the average bugbear. But the average bugbear is stronger by by default than the average lizard folk, so I'll leave them here. I'll leave the bugbears ahead of all of these guys, yeah. But the orcs are, as cool as they are as a race, they do fall short of a lot of things when it comes to the power of their race. And there's nothing to be done about it. They're just dumb. Next, we have hobgoblins. Now, hobgoblins are an interesting one. I like hobgoblins a lot because they take all of the cunning, all of the malice of being a goblin, and they put it in a body that is capable of warfare and a mind that is built for it. Of the, fodder races, the hobgoblin is by far the most dangerous. So I'm going to put them here, right here, because of how strong these guys can be. I've heard they can either be brutal but cunning, or cunning but brutal. Exactly. Hobgoblins are both. And it's very, 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 very cool. Next, we have the merfolk. Now, the merfolk are essentially sea elves, for all intents and purposes. They don't have a lot of... actually, they're not particularly impressive, not even as impressive as elves. They're actually just underwater humans. About the same size, about the same physical capacity. Yeah, there's nothing really that special about them. They can just swim underwater, and that's about it. Next, we have the Lokatha. Now, Lokatha are fish people. They're pretty strong, pretty tough. They like to befriend seals and sea lions. If you've ever played World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King, these are basically that race of fish people that lives in the Arctic regions and spearfishes all day. That's it. That's what they do. They're true neutral. Or neutral in some way. They tend towards neutrality. But they also tend towards good. So they tend towards neutral good, I guess you'd say. And they are very compassionate for the downtrodden because they come from a society where that was a commodity. They are naturally armored, so they're pretty tough. They are very resistant to charms, frighten, paralyzation, poison, and being stunned, as well as being put to sleep. Limited amphibiousness, so they can breathe underwater for 4 hours without suffocating. And they can also speak Aquan, which is the elemental language of water. Overall, pretty good race, pretty tough, pretty strong. I'll put them here. Actually, I'll put these guys here. Yeah, because I feel like the magic that these guys have puts them ahead of the physical attributes that these guys have, right? Because the attributes that these guys have are mostly derived from regular animals, right? This is basically a human on a horse. This is a human that can fly and has talons. This is a human that can, swim for a very long time and is armored. This is a human with magic. Magic and magic, right? Magic, I feel like, stands above that. And then these guys are a mix, right? This is just a human that's tougher. This is a human that is tougher with, I'll put you here, with elven traits, so also has elven magic and all that stuff. Yeah. Next, we have a monkey man, which is called... What the fuck are you? A Hadozi. A Hadazi. Monkey boy. I don't want to hear any fucking racist commentary about the Hadazi. They're cool. They're very dexterous. They can even glide, causing them to fall slowly by extending like the skin membranes that they have here. They're very acrobatic. They like jumping. They actually have innate magic that heightens their natural defenses and lets them like reduce the damage that they would take from an attack. So that's pretty cool. But overall, they're basically just humanoid monkeys. So I'm going to put them right here. Yes. Organizing all of this. Yep. Here we have the halflings. Here we have the humans with some magic to them. Here we have basically humans with some animal traits. Then here we have the monster races. I think the Kenku fall in somewhere in the line here, right? Between halfling races or halfling-esque races and human with animal traits. Yeah. And then you've got the monster races here, which are too dumb to do much more than just being violent animals. Next, we have a pretty strong race. We have the Loxodon. Loxodon are elephant people. Extremely big, extremely dangerous. On average, they stand between 7 and 8 feet tall, which is, funnily enough, the rough height of an orc that isn't, like, hunched over, or a dragonborn. However, they weigh between 300 and 400 pounds. They have powerful builds, they have natural leathery skinned armor, they have trunks, keen smells, they are very, very capable. However, I'm going to put them right here, because they are, again, basically just humanoid animals. They stand in the B tier. They're not going to ever stand up to something like, you know, a well-trained half-giant, like a Goliath fighter or even a Gif, but they're pretty impressive. Actually, now that I think about it, I should actually, if I put the Gif here, should I, because the Loxodon do have natural armor, which the Gif don't have. But the Gif are built for combat. They're actually stronger. They have advantage on strength, ability checks, and saving throws, and count as bigger. So they are objectively stronger, like physically, than the Loxodon. But the Loxodon is armored. And they also have advantage on saving throws against charmed friends, so they have some amount of magical resistance. I actually have to put... I have to switch them. I have to put the Loxodon here and the Gif here. The Gif just got downgraded. Get fucked, Hippo Man. Next, we have the Naga. Now, the Naga are an interesting race because a lot of races actually worship the Naga as gods in Planeshift Amonkhet. They are extremely fast, have immunity to poison, affinity to poison, so they can actually make poisons themselves very easily. They have natural weapons, which I've talked about. They can constrict enemies, or they can bite them to poison them. And the speed bursts that they have are very, very useful at, you know, surprising their enemies. That being said, they also have some affinity to pursuing magic, but they do not have innate magic themselves. They are a race that in their Planeshift, Amonkhet, they are essentially a priestly race. People worship them and treat them very respectfully. I don't know that much about them because I don't really fuck with the Planeshifts that much, but I'm going to put these guys around here, alongside these alongside these races that have animal traits that make them superior to an average human. Next, we have the Kuo-toa. And the Kuo-toa are a funny race for me. Because it's not their power that makes them dangerous. It's the fact that if a Kuo-toa is convinced that you are a god and they begin to worship you, you will slowly but surely begin to gain divine power. Their faith is so strong that they can literally turn other people into gods. Unfortunately, they're too fucking stupid to use it on themselves. Probably because if they did do that, they would kinda not really have the ability anymore, because they need to truly believe it. They have superior dark vision, sunlight sensitivity, and they're slippery. But other than that, nothing impressive about them. I will put them below gnolls because in the power that the race itself, the individual of the race isn't that impressive. It is only through belief and getting a lot of them together that you get the effect that you want out of them. Next, we have... I'm pretty sure that's a Minotaur, but let me double check. Yes, next we have Minotaurs. Now, Minotaurs are a lot of fun. A lot of people like Minotaurs. Wizards of the Coast decided to differentiate Minotaurs from monster Minotaurs. You used to have regular Minotaurs and regular Minotaurs that were just the same but bigger because they're supposed to be bigger. But now you have the Minotaurs of Baphomet, and those are the bad guys. Instead of just, having regular old Minotaurs. So we're going to talk about actual Minotaurs, not Minotaurs of Baphomet. A Minotaur of Baphomet is stupid, so we're not engaging with it. A regular Minotaur, however, is a large creature, powerfully built, has animal-esque traits, but because they were created by Baphomet, they are kind of like gnolls in that sense, where they were created by a demon lord, they can channel some amount of that power to be immune to labyrinths. That's right, they always know which direction is north and have advantage on survival checks, on top of always knowing the way out of a labyrinth. So overall, their power rests in their physicality. They do not have innate armor, but they do have some powerful natural weapons that they can use, not to mention their own powerful brawn. So I'm going to put them right there. Next, we have the Leonin. Leonin are from mythic Odysseys of Theros. They are a powerful warrior race, very proud. They have hunter's instincts, which allow them to do very, very good survival checks, perception, athletics, and intimidation. They have natural weapons. They can frighten their opponents with a mighty roar. And so for that reason, I'm going to put them right here. I'm going to put them below the Gif because the Gif are hippos, and hippos are stronger than lions. But I'm going to put them above the flying ones because the only thing that the Aarakocra have are flight and natural weapons, whereas the Leonin also have additional instincts. They're stronger, they're bigger, like 6 to 7 feet tall on average. These guys are fucking menaces, right? Nobody fucks with a Leonin. Next, we have the Shadar-kai. Now, the Shadar-kai are easily one of the more powerful elven races. They're not as strong as, say, an Eladrin, but they're definitely as strong as the Drow. Shadar-kai are born from the Shadowfell, the Plane of Shadows. They're resistant to necrotic damage. They have the keen senses and fey ancestry and dark vision and trance of an elf. But on top of that, they have the Blessing of the Raven Queen, which allows them to teleport short distances as a bonus action. So in combat, this is something that's almost instantaneous. It's very quick. They can make themselves resistant to all damage when they teleport. So for a moment after they teleport, they're actually really, really hard to damage. And overall, they are very dangerous. I wouldn't say that they are more powerful than Drow, because I don't believe that there's any implication that these elves are physically as strong as Drow. In fact, they are wizened, so they're, kind of smaller and not as tough as the average elf, but they are very, very capable. So they are still elves, and they have these additional, very powerful, innate abilities. Next, we have the Owlin. The Owlin are pretty much the same as the Aven. They don't have natural weapons. They can fly, and they are stealthy. That's it. So while the Aven are eagle-headed, the Owlin are owl-headed, and that's about it. That's the difference. They do have better dark vision than the Aven. Aven, bird people. Next, we have a very powerful race Next, we have the Simic Hybrid. And the Simic Hybrid are interesting. A lot of people represent them as fish-like, but that is not always the case. They are built... Actually, no, that is always the case, because they are built from parts of sea creatures, but they are not always adapted for underwater life. Some of them can glide, some of them can climb really nicely, and some of them can swim underwater without issue. The danger comes from the much more advanced ones, where they add additional limbs and appendages from either crabs, or they can spit acid, or they have carapaces for extra armor. Overall, Simic hybrids are the junction of a humanoid with different sea creatures and their abilities. There's no real downside to this, but they are very rare, and they're very powerful. But not so powerful as to deserve A tier. So I'm going to put them here. I'm going to put them here. Because the average fully matured Simic hybrid could probably, you know, overwhelm these animal hybrid people, but probably not these ones, right? Kenku Warlock can only speak spells that they have heard from their patron through mimicry. That is a very interesting idea. How would he communicate with the party, though? That is important. How would he do that? Unless you mean that when he casts spells, he speaks in his patron's voice, in which case that is pretty cool. Next, we have the Shifter. Now, the Shifter is an interesting one. We all know what a werewolf is. We all know what a lycanthrope is. The Shifter is essentially a were-touched. They are descendant of people who contracted full or partial lycanthropy, but they are not themselves fully lycanthropic. And while they can channel some of their bestial aspects, they cannot fully change shapes. So I think that they belong around here. Because some of them are really tough, some of them are really dangerous, some of them are really fast, some of them are really perceptive, but overall, I think that they belong here. Although I will say, their transformation does give them a lot of toughness, so maybe they belong here, actually. Yeah. And actually, I think I'll move the Dragonborn here, because I think No, because they don't have... They can attain them through feats, though, actually, so I'll put them here. They can have very... I remembered now that the Dragonborn do have feats that make them pretty tough, and we should include those as potential for the race. So I'll put them at the bottom of A tier. A tier is organized, so, you know, the closer to the left you are, the stronger. But the others are just, like, organized by race and type, basically. These are, like, all of the animalesque ones. These are all of the human plus ones, like, races that are better than humans. These are all the ones that are just humans that can have powerful magic innately. I think they can only speak sounds they have heard through mimicry, so I imagine they learn language, but it sounds real messed up because they're using different people's voices. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Think Bumblebee, right? Who uses his radio to speak. Little girl speaking to you, but every word sounds like a different demon saying a word. That is actually pretty cool. That is very, very cool. Next, we have satyrs. Now, there are two types of satyrs. You've got the mythic Odysseys of Theros satyrs, and you've got the regular satyrs. Now, the mythic Odysseys of Theros satyrs are built fucking different, but overall, they are not that strong. They are different from the regular satyrs, is what I mean. Actually, no, they're not. I'm stupid. I was reading it wrong. Regardless, satyrs can jump pretty high with their mirthful leaps. They are innately magical resistant. They can ram things pretty hard, and they are really good at reveling. Did you catch that I said that they were resistant to magic? Because that's a pretty big deal. And in my opinion, that immediately puts them at B tier. They also have a natural weapon, but it's not a particularly powerful one. I'm going to put them here. Because The thing that holds them back, in my opinion, is the fact that they aren't warriors by default, and they mostly don't really have much ambition. They kind of just want to have fun and revel and play, and that's all. So I think that that holds them back as a race, but overall they are pretty strong with their magic resistance and their powerful jumping and their natural weapon. Next we have the Tabaxi. Tabaxi are cat people. I'll put them right here. They are very fast. They have the agility of a cat. They have dark vision and they have a natural weapon. So again, a human with all the benefits of an animal form. Very, very strong stuff. Next we have Harpies. Now, the Harpy is the Siren, not a Harpy, my bad. Now, the Siren from Planeshift Ixalan is basically just a regular human. They can fly short distances, but only when not wearing medium or heavy armor. They can cast the Friends cantrip, that's about it, and overall, not that special compared to humans. They just have a little bit of extra something. Next, we have the Thri-kreen. Now, the Thri-kreen are actually a pretty interesting race. One of my favorites for reasons. Overall, chameleonic carapace, which gives them a lot of armor class. They are very well armored. Secondary arms, which they can use to manipulate weapons that have a light property or open doors and hold torches and stuff. So a lot of the times you will encounter a Thri-kreen that is holding a, full-sized large weapon on his two main arms, and then the secondary arms he's holding, knives or tiny swords to stab you with. They're telepathic, they don't sleep, and they are pretty big. They're not huge, they're not like large in size, but they are pretty tall compared to humans. So overall, I would say that these guys belong here. Right here. Very, very strong, very, very strong. Imagine trying to fight a Thri-kreen that is using 2 long swords and 2 scimitars at the same time, and he's just fucking attacking you 4 times a turn. And he's not even a fighter. He's just built like that. That's just the thing he does. No bias whatsoever because Ant people. Absolutely no bias whatsoever. If there was bias, they'd be here. But there is no bias, so they are here. Actually, I'll put them here. Because I think that their physicality puts them ahead of the Furbolgs, who aren't warriors, and their magic isn't lent for fighting capabilities. They're just peaceful druids that mind their own business most of the time, but they are still half giants, so they're pretty strong, and their magic does help them because they can go invisible and do all sorts of shittery. Or the Goliaths, which are fully dedicated to combat, but don't have some of the advantages that the Thri-kreen do. They are stronger, but the Thri-kreen can deal with it by, virtue of their armor. No, actually, I convinced myself, yeah, it has to be here. It has to be right here. I unconvinced myself. Next, we have the Tritons. Now, I said that the merfolk were basically humans that can swim underwater indefinitely. Tritons are essentially the same thing, but for elves. So I'm going to put them right here, at the same tier as elves. They have innate water magics, they can breathe air and water, they can communicate simple ideas to any beast, elemental, or monstrosity that has swimming speed, and they can resist cold damage because they are meant to live in the frigid ocean depths. Pretty strong stuff. I put them at the same level as an elf. Next we have Turtles. Now, Turtles aren't special. Like, they're not super special. They're pretty cool. They're basically giant humanoid turtles. They are very well armored. They can claw at things, so they do have a natural weapon. But overall, they're slow. They're not particularly dangerous unless you piss them off. So I'm going to put them right here next to the lion by virtue of that insane armor class. They can't wear armor because they have built-in armor with their massive shells, but they can't use shields, so, that's something. So That is pretty good something. And then they can withdraw into their shell as an action until they emerge to do stuff. But they can protect themselves really nicely inside of their shell. A level 1 Turtle starts off with 17 base armor class, and they can get a +4 to that by just hiding in their shell. So they make for really good casters by virtue of having, built-in armor. But I do not know that they have much of a leaning towards it. They are pretty strong compared to humans. They have a +2 strength, and they are pretty wise, owing to the fact that they live very, very long lives. In fact, they can... Oh, wait, no, they don't live long lives at all. They live 50 years. Huh, interesting. I thought they lived longer than that. I was wrong. Oh, well, regardless. The next race that we have to talk about is the Reborn. Now, the Reborn are essentially Revenants. For all intents and purposes, they are a person who died and came back. They aren't super strong compared to humans physically, but they do have innate abilities owing to the fact that they are undead for all intents and purposes. They are resistant to disease and poison. Advantage on saving throws. They don't need to eat, drink, or even breathe, or sleep, and can't be put to sleep by magic because they don't really need to sleep. That being said, they can channel memories of their past life. My whole face is itchy. They can channel memories of their past life to gain proficiency in a lot of different things that you might not expect. So, Reborn are essentially just an undead humanoid with all of the powers that gives. So, by virtue of this not necessarily having a downside and it just being upsides, this goes in B tier by power. That being said, there are implications to being undead like this, but it's all up to your DM. Next, we have the Yuan-ti. Now, I actually have 2 Yuan-ti here, the regular Yuan-ti and the Yuan-ti Pureblood. We will get to the Pureblood later. For now, we will speak of the Yuan-ti. The Yuan-ti are snake people. They're very powerful. They have innate magic. They have innate magic resistance and poison resistance, as well as the ability to communicate with snakes. Now, the magic resistance and the poison resistance is pretty good. They are strong, but not, like, immensely so. No stronger than the average human. In fact, if you go and look at the sheet for the Yuan-ti Malison, which is their warrior type, they have 16 strength, which is actually less than the average knight. A knight has... Actually, no, a knight also has 16 strength. What was I thinking about? Was I thinking of veterans? Or do veterans also have 16 strength? Yeah, 16 strength. That's the average strength of a human. So they are no stronger than a human. They just have all of these additional protections and abilities, which is why they land themselves in B tier. Now, we have reached the Warforged. The Warforged is a very interesting race. Something that has never once been included in their sheet is the fact that they are magic resistant, owing to the fact that they have a magical core. That core is protected from dispelling magic. They can be affected by mind-altering spells and healing magic, but they are immune to poison because, they don't have veins, they cannot be poisoned. They're made of stone, metal, and wood, making them extremely tough. They can add armor and weapons to their form, making it so you're essentially fighting what is basically a cyborg that can modulate himself or herself as much as they want. They can add as many weapons to their form as they want. They can add as much armor to their form as they want. Some Warforged get so big that they are basically engines of war. These guys are built for combat, and there are very few things that can stand up to a Warforged that knows what it's doing. For that reason, they go on high A tier. These guys are powerful. Some of them learn magic. Most of them don't, but they can learn magic. And if that doesn't terrify you, I don't know what the fuck will. Because this is basically a machine that can fill itself up with armor and weapons, and then on top of that, it just starts shitting out high-level spells at you. So that's what a Warforged can be. Most of them don't really do that because they lack the ambition. However, you can in fact teach a Warforged to do all of these things because they are functionally immortal. They cannot be magically aged either, and they show no signs of deterioration with age, not even requiring, like, fixing because of their magical nature. Warforged are super soldiers. Very, very powerful thing. Next, we have the Plasmoids. Now, Plasmoids are an interesting thing. They're basically slimes that are fully conscious. They are capable of using weapons. They're amorphous, so they can squeeze into tight spaces. They have dark vision. They can hold their breath for a very long time, resist acid and poison, and they can shape themselves as part of a single action. So within 6 seconds, they can give themselves a head, arms, legs, makeshift hands and feet, or revert to a limbless blob very easily. Sometimes they have more limbs than just 2 of each. It all comes down to what they want to be. However, they can extrude a pseudopod up to 6 inches wide and 10 feet long or reabsorb it into their body, and they can use this pseudopod to, like, manipulate objects in their form. These guys aren't particularly strong. They're, like, no different from humans in terms of their power. But overall, they're an interesting race. I'll say that about them. They're an interesting race, but they're not particularly powerful. Next, we have the Vedalken. Now, Vedalken are a human-esque race. They're very intelligent and wise and curious, but they're also very dispassionate. They're just precise, tireless scholars for all intents and purposes. They not only let's actually read some of their lore. These guys are from Ravnica. Vedalken not only believe that nothing is perfect, they rejoice in it. Every imperfection is a chance for improvement, and progress is an endless march toward a state of perfection that can never be reached. This viewpoint leads Vedalken to pursue their work with delighted enthusiasm, never deterred by setbacks, and excited by every opportunity for improvement. They're very rational, they're reasoning toward perfection, and all they care about is study and research. So basically, they're an entire race of fucking nerds. So I'll put them right here. Basically humans. Nothing else to it. Next, we have an interesting and very, very small numbered race. The Verdun. The Verdun are a race of telepathic goblins with a healing factor. That's it. That's all they are. They are from Acquisitions Incorporated. There's only a few hundred of them. And unlike goblins, who are stupid and violent, these guys mostly mind their own business and kind of want to live peaceful, calm lives. So I'm going to put them right here next to the Deep Gnome. They don't have innate magic beyond the telepathy and the healing factor. But other than that, they're pretty normal. Basically just a halfling, minus the luck and the bravery and stuff. Now, let's talk about the Yuan-Ti Pureblood. Yuan-Ti Purebloods are actually the lowest rung of their race. Nobody really likes them. Humans distrust them because they're evil. Yes, Yuan-Ti don't really have emotions the way humans do. They are snakes by nature. And so because of that, they kind of just function as spies for their race. They are infiltrators. And in fact, that is what they are called as of the Monster Manual 2025. They are evil, human-appearing monsters. They have innate magic, poison immunity, and magic resistance, same as these guys, but unlike these guys, they have no natural armor. So I am going to put them next to them. Because they do have magic resistance, and magic resistance is fucking huge. I was thinking of putting them next to the humans, but the magic resistance is fucking huge, as is the innate magic. So, we're getting very close to the end here. Let's talk about tieflings. Everybody's favorite race. Or at least, I'm not going to say the joke I was going to make, but you know who I'm talking about. Every time the new tiefling player appears in your game, you already know that they're gay. It is what it is. It's just a fact of life. There's nothing wrong with it. I have no problem with it. I love tiefling players, but it is what it is. Now, normally, people know about tieflings of Asmodeus who are naturally red-skinned. However, there are tieflings for every circle of hell, and each one is a different color. Some are more purplish, some are bluish, some are more yellowish, and some tieflings actually look very close to human with demonic or devilish mutations. Most tieflings don't really live very long because of these mutations. It's actually very rough on them. Some of them have fangs, some of them have sharp claws, some of them have hooves. Overall, though, the thing that sets tieflings apart from humans is their natural affinity towards magic, specifically hellish magic, and resistant to fire. They're all resistant to fire, with, I believe, 1 or 2 exceptions. No, I think they're all resistant to fire. Yeah, they just have different abilities depending on where their bloodline is from. Because of how they are essentially just humans with a little bit of extra magic. I love tiefling players, says streamer loudly to ensure his tiefling player girlfriend doesn't salt his coke. You have never once played a tiefling. You have not played one tiefling. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. That's a lie. What tiefling did you play? Wasn't she a Genasi? No, yeah, you're right. She was a tiefling. She was a tiefling. She was, her patron was a genie. My bad. You're right. You're right. You played a tiefling one time. That does not, however, make you a tiefling player, right? Doing something once, it's not the same thing, right? This isn't like a goat fucking situation, right? You build 100 bridges, you're not a bridge builder. You fuck one goat, you're a goat fucker. That's not how this works, right? You played one tiefling. You gotta play fucking 10 tieflings before I call you a tiefling player. You gotta make a lot more tieflings than that. That being said, you did play one tiefling, so I will grant that yeah. But I do like tiefling players, they're fun. That being said, on to the next race. The Troglodyte. They're strong, they're tough, they have natural armor, they stink, they're stupid, and no one likes hanging out with them. And the final race, the Wilden. Wilden, I actually don't know much and nothing about them. But I believe they are amongst the last races here, right? 1 second. There you go. Found them. Wilden are a race of humanoids from the Feywild that emerged into the prime material plane in the years that followed the Spell Plague. They appear plant-like. They are quite stealthy. They prefer to be... they prefer to use hand axes or special great clubs uniquely carved in designs and patterns of their tribe that told the story of past triumphs. They also favor longbows, as they are excellent snipers. Sometimes the most powerful among them wield martial weapons and nature magics. Most use spears and use totems to focus their sorcery. It is sorcery as it is innate magic. And overall, these guys seem very Dryad-esque. I don't see any mention of most of them having innate magic, just the strongest ones. They are made of wood, which would, in theory, or actually no, they are wood-like. Or is it animalesque? It's kind of hard to tell if they are made of wood. They definitely appear made out of wood, but maybe that's not the case. Overall, they are fey creatures that use cunning and power. I'm going to put them here. I think they belong in B tier by virtue of their fey nature and abilities, and the fact that the strongest among them do develop innate magic. Innate magic is very, very strong and very, very hard to deal with. But, that being said, that is the final tier list. Let me scroll down so I am not in the way. There you go. That is the final tier list of all of the D&D races. I did not include Cambions because they are not a player race. Devas are a player race to some extent, but if I were to include Cambions, they would also be an S tier, as they are similarly powerful to Devas. I would put them up here. I did not put Half-Dragons in S tier, even though they are one of my favorite races, because I feel like their power is only comparable to an Aasimar. The reason I didn't include Cambions, they're not really a player race, so I kind of forgot them. Whoops. But I would put them in S tier as they are comparable to Devas. So, I hope you all had a good time. Tune in tomorrow. We're going to be playing Silksong. Unfortunately, we did not have the time to play Silksong today. We will be doing it tomorrow, though. Gonna try and make it a very long stream. Gonna try and start the stream real early so we can just jump right into it and play a ton. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's stream. I'll see you all tomorrow. Have a good one. I'm gonna drop you guys off with somebody who is also doing something fun.